everybody, it's Perrott, founder of the Ladies Working Dog Group. Are you feeling stuck with your gun dog training? Trust me, you're not alone, and that's exactly why you need to be here. Every week, we're bringing you the best tips and hacks to make training your gun dog easy peasy. We'll keep it straightforward, no fuss, just actionable guidance that you can put straight to use. So let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of Found It, Fetched It. This week we're going to be talking all about trusting the process of foundational training. Joining me for this week's episode is our amazing LWDG group expert, Claire Denier. How are you today, Claire?
Good morning, Jo. I'm very well, thank you, and happy to be back for another podcast.
Well, thank you for giving me your time today to do this, and also thank you to the listeners for tuning in. This is going to be a really interesting episode, as all of them are. But I know me and you had a chat before we've sort of come onto the recording and said, what are these things? What are the importance of foundational training? So can we talk a little bit, first of all, about the importance of the foundations in the grand scheme of gun dog training?
Yeah, I think it's such a broad topic and subject, and it will be a really interesting one to cover, because very much depending on whether your personal gun dog lives in the home or in a kennel, your foundational training may vary depending on that. But we have to look at the foundations as a whole, not just look at them as a command or a cue. So I think people often get very hung up on teaching the skill set, but can forget about the other foundational stuff, the manners in the home, the teaching the dog how to behave in general, how to be a good member of society. They're all part of that foundational process as well. So it's as I say, depending on what your dog's lifestyle is, this may vary. But for a gun dog that lives in the home, we are covering a very wide range of topics here.
I know that I have been guilty of it in the past, and I see it sometimes in new members. We get a dog and we want to do such a good job. We're trying to teach everything all at once. We're trying to rush up. Like within the membership, we have levels like foundation, novice, intermediate, advanced. We all want to get to the top, and sometimes we bypass the amount of time that we need to be at the bottom, don't we?
Absolutely. The thing is, on YouTube or on social media, you see all these really fancy videos of dogs doing these incredible retrieves or hunting and, doing all this incredible stuff. And it looks amazing and it feels amazing when you're doing it. But there's an incredible lot of hard work on the foundation skills that goes into getting to that end result. And without those foundation skills, the more advanced stuff will fall apart at some point. A lot of it will come naturally to the dog. So depending on the breed of the dog, innate behaviors of the dog, some of that stuff will be really natural. But still, without really good solid foundations, when you start progressing and advancing, you will see holes in the training. Things will start to go wrong if you haven't put the groundwork into developing those strong foundations first. And regardless of breed, the real core foundations for your average gun dog in training are going to be very, very similar.
And I think a lot of us, we don't know the process to trust the process, but we do need to trust our experts that these foundations are like absolutely essential. They're almost like when people say, build your house on rock or build your house on sand, aren't they? Your house on sand might stand up for a bit, but at some point it's going to fall apart. So it's really important that people get these foundational cues, these foundational behaviors inside and outside the house correct before jumping up.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, just to add to that, I think one of the issues is for a handler or an owner working on the things that are the hardest. You don't really want to do it. Like if your dog's really good at something, you enjoy doing it because it feels good to both of you. You get a buzz out of it. It's really good fun. But if there's things you're struggling with, but they are core foundational things, you don't really want to do it because it's hard work and it's going to drain your energy. But we have to do it. We have to put the effort into those things. And I sort of try and say to clients so often, just do it a little bit every day. You haven't got to spend like hours on the thing that's really hard, but a little bit of effort every day will see an end result. You can't ignore it. You can't just let that go, because if we take hill work as an example, the two main things that most people contact me about that they struggle with is recall and heel work. They're the two foundational things when we're talking about a skill set as opposed to the in the home stuff. They're the two main things that people will contact me about. Now, without those two things, without the heel work, a lot of the more advanced gun dog work will be very difficult. And without a recall, a lot of the gun dog work will be very difficult. So they need to be, really considered, a lot of effort put into them to get them right for that more flashy stuff to actually work in the end.
It's really interesting because we say to every single member, don't we? When you join, start with the Harness Handler. It's our foundation, it's our flagship course. If you do that course, everything else can be built upon the top of that course. And then from my side of the screen, I can see like how much of that course has been completed before a member goes on to something else. And it's really good that people are really strong on things like the sit, and then, like they get the recall, they don't really spend that much time on the heel work, but it sort of identifies exactly what you've said. The things that are harder, they maybe don't spend even as much time learning about. They go on to the stuff we all enjoy, like the recall, like directions, like hunting, stuff that we watch the dog do and enjoy and think is fun.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's the reality of it. So often the handler sort of thinks to themselves, the owner, the handler thinks to themselves, I know I need to do this, but this is not fun. That's why I say bite size and almost create a poop sandwich. I'm not being rude. A poop sandwich. So if there's something really hard I've got to work on, I will start with something really easy that the dog loves and is fun. And then I'll do the hard thing that I don't really want to do, but I'll do it. And then I'll finish with something else like really fun. So create a little poop sandwich, and it makes it feel much better.
Poop sandwich is perfectly allowed, Claire. It doesn't take us into explicit. So do you think that people understand that the more work you do on the foundations, the stronger your link and communication and bond with your dog is?
Yeah, it's so important. And I think quite often people miss the point on it. And if we go right back to the foundations in the home, if your dog is really rude and doesn't have good manners in the home, then how can you expect them to not be rude and have good manners out on the field? We have to start in the home. We have to start with that foundational stuff. And especially with a puppy, at the minute, we've got 4 Labradors in our home. We've got Indy, who's almost 12, Dude, who's 10, Rose, who's 5, and Jeannie, who's 15 weeks. Now, Jeannie is learning, but she is such a small puppy. She's like a little sponge for information, but she needs a lot of management because she doesn't yet have maturity or self-control. And she won't have those two things for a long time yet. I'm talking a couple of years before she's developed into a mature adult dog. So there's a lot of management going on. We're using a crate so that she can't get up to mischief. We're using a lead to show her what we need her to do using guided learning. Obviously, we're doing all of our training very positively, but she has to understand rules and boundaries, and she has to understand how to fit within the home, how to act politely, how to not be rude, all the things we don't want them doing, like jumping up. I'll be honest with you, she's a really, really bouncy puppy. So she wants to jump all the time. She's like a little kangaroo, bouncy, 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 And so we've got to teach her that, listen, we know that feels really good, but we need 4 paws on the floor, and we're going to make that really rewarding for you. So it starts that basic. And if we can't get those things right with her as a puppy, she will struggle as a gun dog later on.
It's really interesting you said that because like if you follow me on my Instagram stories, listeners, Goose, who is Meg's poodle cross, Bichon, maybe some other stuff in there we don't know, had his bits chopped off yesterday. One hadn't come out, so he needed the operation to have him taken out, and I would have had him done anyway because of the type of dog he is. And he lives with Rex, who is an entire male, and I didn't want any sort of like fighting with that. But when we took him in, you know, he travels really well in the car. He's got a seat, terrible, a car seat for a dog, but he's really, really little. The other's going proper crates. But he got to the vet, and the vet was like, he was great in the crate for us. He was great in, because they don't even have crates, so they're like cages, aren't they? They're vet cages. He was good to come around. He's come home. He's got quite a few days of crate rest now ahead of him. And I think, had all our dogs not been taught that the crate is totally a place to chill and be happy, this situation with him now would be incredibly hard. Not only would I have an unwell dog, not unwell, but a dog that's had an operation, who's a little bit woozy, a little bit drugged up, he'd also be really, really anxious about being locked in something. So things like that are so important, even if we don't see why they're important right at the beginning, aren't they?
Absolutely. You can't underestimate the importance of that. Now, for instance, if you hadn't done that crate training, even being at the vets would have been traumatic, because at the vets, they will be in cages or crates, that they have to be for their own safety. So if your dog hasn't been exposed to that crate type environment being a pleasant place to be, the whole experience would have been far more traumatic for him. And now the recovery time would have been far harder for you and for him. Some people really do struggle to understand, and they call it a cage and they think it looks cruel. I mean, I call it a crate. When I'm teaching my puppy to go in there, I make it really rewarding. I feed them in there. I will toss a little treat in there and give them the command kennel, and then they know that means to jump in there. And then I call them out, and I use it to teach door manners as well. So we can start teaching door manners using a crate with the tiniest little puppies. But don't underestimate the importance of, if your dog needs to go to the vets for treatment, your dog will find it far less traumatic if they're okay in that sort of environment.
Yeah, and I think, even things like, I haven't done it with Goose, and maybe I should have. And we talked about this in another podcast. It's like the prevention better than cure. He's been through quite a lot, and like he's not muzzle trained, right? But things like that, when they go to the vet, it makes me think, what if he'd been in incredible pain going to the vet, and he wasn't muzzle trained, and they decided he needed to be muzzled in order to deal with whatever the incident was. It's better for me to be ahead of that and him being quite happy for somebody to attach something around his face, rather than wait until he's in a reactive situation. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. I know what you mean. I think this goes for everything like restraint of a dog as well as muzzling of a dog. They're both really important. Now, when John and I teach our puppy foundation or dog school courses, we cover handling in part of that. And that's teaching the dog to be okay with being touched all over, handled all over, their ears touched, moved, positioned, checking every part of the body, the eyes, the nose, the ears, the mouth. But we also talk about the importance of muzzle training, and the importance of teaching your dog to be okay with being restrained. A lot of the time when I speak to owners and they've got young dogs, if they haven't done this, the first time they go to the vet or the groomer, it's a bit of a car crash, because the dog freaks out about having to be held in a position for something to be done. Now, that could then lead to that dog becoming bitey because they're scared, and then the muzzle being put on. So it's like a chain. You've got to get the dog okay with being restrained and being handled, but it's really a bonus to also train them to be okay with having a muzzle on in case it is required. Because, as you say, if the dog is in pain or fear, they might react in a way they wouldn't normally react. So this whole thing is really super important and should be part of their foundational training. I make it very easy for my dogs to learn to accept having a muzzle put on their face. I just pop a treat in the muzzle, put it on, build that up. And I'm sure we have talked about this on another podcast, but it's an important part of the training because it might have to be done. And we want to make anything that might happen to the dog as less scary as possible. And this is part of building a resilient dog. To build a resilient dog, you've got to put the work in when they're a puppy, or if you take them on a bit older, you're going to have to work really hard to build resilience. So teaching the dog to be okay with being restrained, because sometimes there is no choice. It has to be done. If your dog has a serious injury, you can't wait for the dog to be okay with it. It could bleed out in that time. So, we have to make sure our dogs are okay with being handled, with being touched, with being restrained. And that muzzle training is another important piece to throw onto that.
I think as well, when we're talking about like these parts, like for new owners listening and think, wow, that's quite a lot. But like you said, if you break it down into manageable bits and you almost have like a list, or like I know on one of your master classes, we've got a socialization checklist. You can print it off and tick through that. Going through the hot mess handler, you can literally tick off those cues and go through that. But it's about being organized in your mind, isn't it? About what do I need to cover in little tiny bits, celebrating the small wins, tiny little goals, really getting really happy with the dog and showing the dog that when they do stuff, I am going to be super excited about it, making them super excited about it. It's all these little bits that makes this a rock solid base.
Yeah, absolutely. I find it really useful. I am a list person. I like to know what I've done and haven't done. So I will have a socialization and habituation list. So that's all the things that I need my puppy or dog to be exposed to help prepare them for life in general. There will then be things that I consider my sort of foundational home life training. So doorway manners, settling, crate training, all of those kinds of things. That's another list. And then I've got my gundog or training specific cues, commands, things that I'm working through. And if you think about it, if you're working with a puppy or a very young dog, less is more. And so little short sessions is far more productive than trying to do one or two really long sessions. Most puppies and young dogs do not have the mental capacity to learn like that. They get tired, they're not absorbing the information, they get bored, they get distracted. So if you're breaking that training down into 3 or 4 sessions in a day, you could say, right, so that morning session is going to be socialization and habituation. So I'm going to drive out in the car, get the puppy out, let them explore the world, see everything. And then late morning, I'm going to have a tea break. So I'm going to let the puppy out in the garden, toilet training. And then I might do a little bit of hill work and a bit of recall training. And then early afternoon, you might choose to do something else. Maybe that could be when you do your handling. So sitting the dog up, touching them all over, touching the ears, that little bit of muzzle training. And then in the evening, you might decide to do something else. So you can not overdo things. So if every session you do with a puppy is the same, it might get monotonous for you. It might be too much for the puppy. But what I wouldn't be trying to do is like train for an hour and go, right, so I've got to do all this massive list of things in this hour. You're going to overwhelm the puppy. They haven't got the ability to retain that much information. They're going to get bored, distracted, or tired. And a tired puppy is very often not a very happy puppy. They get mouthy, they get bitey. And I'm saying puppy, but the same applies to young dogs or dogs in learning. If the dog doesn't know it, pretty much you're treating them like a puppy. So again, it's still better to do short and sweet sessions and break things up. So those lists can be really useful.
And I think like what you just said there is really important for listeners to understand, isn't it? It's the fact that it doesn't matter if you're sitting there looking at an 8-year-old dog thinking, oh, I've missed the boat. Well, you haven't. You just got to treat them like a puppy and just introduce things quietly and, and in an organized fashion and consistently, rather than going, oh, you're an adult, you should just get this.
Oh, yeah, 100%. So very often I get new clients come to me. John has the same. They might have a 2, 3, 4, maybe older dog than that. Um, and they come to us and there are issues in the training and we unpick everything and it's like, well, actually the foundations aren't solid. This is where we need to go. So if we look at heel work as an example of that, I'll say, does your dog understand where heel is? And they'll say, yeah, I think so. I say, okay, that's fine. Let your dog just mooch here. Now say heel. They'll say heel or whatever their word is that they're using because, that it could be a different word. And the dog just doesn't even acknowledge them, look at them or anything. And I'm like, okay, I don't believe your dog actually understands what heel is. I said, I would say something like, would it be fair to say that perhaps the only time you say the word heel is when the dog is not in the heel position and you're about to do something, whatever that is, and bring them back into heel, and then you just carry on. And they're like, yeah, that's probably right. And I'm like, okay, so we now need to treat your dog like a puppy. And we need to actually teach your dog where heel position actually is and build some value in that position. And they're like, wow, okay, that's amazing. And I'm like, yeah. And the thing is, because it's an adult dog, they will learn it quicker than a puppy might. But the downside is because they're an older dog, they may have bad habits that we also have to break. So then we have to look at the right way for that dog to solve that problem, to fix those issues, to correct any unwanted behaviors appropriately. But the training piece has to be almost like teaching a puppy because they don't know, they don't understand. So how can we tell a dog off for not doing something if they don't know how to do it? I really babbled on there, Joe.
No, you didn't. And as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking like of the members who like last week shared stories, and like I think I know our members pretty well. And then some of we know when asked, well, what happened? How did you get from A to B? What was that A to B for you? What was your problem? Where was your frustration? When I was reading them, I was getting almost tearful. So I was thinking, these are people, and I knew they existed, but like I didn't know the specifics. Dogs that maybe they'd come to us, for example, and they'd been chatting to us on calls about wanting to get the dog off the long line, for example. What we weren't aware of is that they'd been struggling for 2 years with that dog on a long line, and now the dog was off the long line. And I'm thinking, it's sometimes the simplest of advice, but the correct advice, like go back to these basics, get this right, and then that problem stops being a problem. It changes lives, doesn't it? When you say, okay, stop with my dog, this isn't going right. Is the problem here, or is actually the problem somewhere back there where I haven't got my foundations right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, no one should have any guilt about that either. If you haven't been told it, you don't know it. You don't know what you don't know. And I've said this to so many clients recently that have come to me and they've seen 2, 3, 4 trainers before me, perhaps. And they then like, oh, but why didn't I know this? And I'm like, you didn't know it because nobody told you. Nobody explained it. Or maybe they did, but not in a way that that client understood. And like when I first meet a client, I will very often say to them, if you're a visual learner, tell me because I'm happy to demonstrate anything that isn't sounding clear to you. Because when we talk in words, we're saying how to do a thing, but the interpretation might not be quite the same as what we're trying to get across. The same with written word, isn't it? The same with a written word. You read something, you might misinterpret it. So I always say to people, if you're a visual learner, just say so, because I'm more than happy to actually do it with you, show you, guide you through it, practically, not just tell you what to do, because the way I speak might not translate perfectly right for that client. And that's really important. And I think the thing is when you're a trainer, unless you're doing board and train or you're taking dogs and physically training them yourself, you're training the person. And that's the important thing. You have to be able to communicate with the person. You can't just tell them what to do and expect them to interpret that 100% perfectly. You might have to show them. So sometimes I might have a dog with me so that I can show how it could look, should look. Or I might say, would you like me to take your lead and just show you what this would look like if we do it together? I'm very open to doing what needs to be done to help that client get the result they need. And I cannot be fixed in one way. I have to be a flexible trainer to help the client achieve that.
I've always lived when I've been teaching like adults for for coaching, for management, wherever. Tell, show, try, do. Tell them how to do it, so that gives you them the capability for them to listen. Show them how to do it, let them try, let them do. But I also think as well, like if you ask my husband, and I'm sure he'll tell you, I am the worst listener in the world, which is, it sounds shocking, right? But if he's telling me something like on the phone, or if I'm not looking at his face, he can ask me a question about what he's told me 20 minutes later, and I'm like a goldfish. I have no concept what he's speaking about. Sometimes he says to me, if it's something really important, he said, Joe, look at me a minute. And then I'll stop to whatever I'm doing and I'll look at him and I'll focus. And he'll say it and I won't forget it. But for me, like if somebody's on the phone and they're telling me information, even though they speak in the English language, it actually means nothing to me. I don't process it well. I have to see them speak almost. So yeah, I think it's important for us to understand that, but also understanding that dogs' ways of learning, dogs' ways of understanding take time to build processes, memory paths, all those things. So when we get frustrated that we're not going quick enough, and again, we've got another podcast on this, like the working dog age race. It's about just being slow, steady, little bit, get the foundations. Because once you've done that work, all the amazing things you want to do are so much simpler.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing is, that's why the communication to the client is so important, because if the client doesn't understand it right, they're not going to communicate it right to the dog either. But add to that, every dog is different. And although dogs learn in the same way, every dog is different. Their behavior patterns are different. Their motivators are different. The way they kind of are because of their breed. So specific, breed behaviors might differ. So although dogs generally learn in the same way, they're also very individual. So we have to be very open and prepared to kind of think outside the box and work with the dog in front of us, which is what we always say, working with the dog in front of us. But then the handler has to be consistent and they have to proof the training. So it's actually such a huge thing, and that's why it can become very overwhelming. But if the work and effort is put into the foundational stuff first, and that's all really solid, so all of the subject matters in our Hot Mess Handler course, if all of those subject matters, the foundations are really solid, building and advancing on them becomes so much simpler.
Do you think, like obviously the Hot Mess Handler without a doubt works, our whole process of learning, our levels work, we see our members getting better and better. But do you think as well, do you know when members come along to like our gundog holidays or something like that, it gives them another, like an additional level of experience. Like for example, our foundational gundog holiday, it's a chance for them to be far more in-depth training and learning, watching themselves and watching their peers to accelerate the learning process, isn't it?
Absolutely, 100%. So one of the things I like most about those sorts of things, the training weekends that we're doing, the foundational one, the reason I love that so much is so many dogs have got the foundations in a set scenario. So the house and the garden. This is the most common thing we see. It's the battle of getting that same behavior in other places, in other settings and scenarios and environments. So when people come on the foundation training, their dog technically might actually be more novice level, but they can't do the foundations in a group setting or in a new environment. So by coming in, you have got your trainers who are then giving you the tools and the methodology to actually get that right in that setting and scenario, give you the skill set to then go, right, I now know how to apply this in a group training session. So coming on that training weekend with a dog that technically could do more, but struggles in a group environment or struggles in a new environment, we can say to you, this is how you achieve it. So then they can take that and just proof it everywhere else. So it's really beneficial. I think it's important people don't underestimate the value of the foundations, but how to get those foundations the same as you can do them in the house and the garden, get that in different environments and in group training classes, and when you go out training with friends and all the rest of it. I think the tricky thing is dogs are so complex in so many ways. We have what we call one-time learning events, and usually for us, sadly, that might be a negative thing. So something might scare the dog that one time, and that could then create a knock-on effect. That's behavioural. That needs to be dealt with quickly, efficiently, effectively, to help the dog. Sadly for us, most of the things we want the dogs to learn and want to be solid need to be proofed and trained in different situations, scenarios, settings, with a variety of different people and dogs to become solid. So sometimes it doesn't always go our way how dogs learn.
Yeah, and I think we see, you know, again, this, until you know that you can take your dog anywhere and they will like work with you on the foundational cues, they're not solid, are they? Like if you're like, right, you know, I've gone through this, and I know I've told this before, but like my uncle saying to me, does your dog know to wait, you know, to sit or and not go when the dummy's thrown? And I've gone, yeah. And my uncle threw the dummy and my dog was gone. And I was like, oh my God, no. And then I thought, you know, as I've learned, my dog did know how to sit there while I threw a dummy or somebody else threw a dummy, but not when somebody else threw a dummy. Plus, the whole scenario, my uncle made a noise when he threw it. Now, that wasn't something I was doing. I wasn't making noise as I was throwing them. And that affected Buddy. And also, another event where somebody threw a low dummy and, you know, like across the floor, almost rabbit level. He shot up away from me, and I was like, ah. And you think that, you know, it is frustrating as an owner, but we have to step back and like not laugh about it, but go, all right, that's another foundation. That's, you know, another way this cue hasn't been put in as a foundation yet.
Yeah. So, and that's exactly right. And it's like directions. I had one of our more advanced gundog classes last weekend, and I said to them, once you've trained your outs, your lefts, rights, and your backs, how often do you really actually practice that under different scenarios, different environments? We tend to, once it's trained, we just think the dog has got it, what a left, right is, what a right is, what a back is. And I said, so we're going to test it today. And we used a central point in the field. And I said, what we're going to do is you're going to walk around this circle and going to blow a whistle, and there will be a blind retrieve in the middle. And wherever you stop, I'm going to basically tell one of you to put your dog in there, and it could be an out or a back. And for some of the dogs, you could see that it was muscle memory. They knew what a left and a right felt like in the body. So they just did that movement and ended up in the right place. For other dogs, the lines were very, very flaky. And it was like, okay, so you need to do loads and loads of memory outs and memory backs, and changing the send point from where you put that direction on. So you take that footprint away. And they were like, just never practiced it. And I was like, no. And this is again the thing. Once you've trained it, you just expect the dog to do that thing, regardless of the circumstance, scenario, environment. And sometimes it's not that easy for the dog. So we have to help them develop that.
Think of it from a human perspective, right? Like there's certain things on our website I have done a million times, maybe putting up a piece of content or doing a course or putting something else up. And then day before yesterday, I was putting something up and it had to go into a different section. And I was like, how do I do that? And I had to literally stop and like search to find an previous example of it that I could look at and like look at the back end of it and go, oh, that's how I did it. Like I've done these thousands of times, but because I haven't done that specific way for a long time, it evaded me. And I think we we need to remember our dogs are not that dissimilar from us in
Yeah.
what we do repetitively sticks, and what we don't do repetitively sometimes gets lost in memory.
Yeah, there's no harm, and actually, it's really good practice to regularly go back to foundations, go back to basics, refresh them, remind the dog of those things, because it can be quite easy when we move on to the more advanced stuff to forget that sometimes we might need to refresh and revisit those foundations. But what I would say is if something goes wrong in the more advanced stuff, really strip that back, and it will probably because there's a weakness in the foundation training. So it will be a case of going, okay, so what was the foundation training that led me to that point, and do I need to revisit that? Is that where the weakness is?
Yeah, because if you think about it, the foundations are, let's look at it this way, it's the training. Novice is you learning how to do the training a little bit more. Intermediate is like advancing the complexity of the foundations. Advanced is hugely, like multiplying the complexity of the foundations, but they all always come back to the
Foundation.
foundations.
Yeah, they do. I mean, when we look at our little lesson plans that we now have, the lesson plans, the foundations, it's kind of in line with a lot of the hot mess handler stuff. The novice is then adding on to that your lefts and your rights and your backs. But if your dog can't do a straight line facing the way they're facing first, you don't want to start introducing your lefts and your rights and your backs. The intermediate, then you're putting those things together and actually using them together. And then you're advancing is obviously, yes, advancing those exercises and actually using those skill sets. So yeah, but it all comes back to the foundation. If the dog hasn't learned to trust following the arm, as an example, well, how are you going to do blind retrieves later on if your dog doesn't trust and believe that arm? So it's really important.
Yeah, because if you think about it, like as we're talking about it, the foundations are your cues, your commands, whatever you want to call them. Your intermediate, your novice, your advanced, they're just sequences of those cues.
Yeah, you're developing them, you're proofing them, you're using them as opposed to teaching them. And I think that's the thing to remember. Are you teaching the dog something or are you using it? So I think that's the really important thing that I tend to always think about when I'm working with my dog or a client's dog is, are we teaching this or are we using it?
I think that's an amazing point in which to end this podcast, which has been absolutely fabulous. I hope to listeners you have understood now the importance of your foundational training, trust in the process. If you are a member and you're listening and you're like, oh, I need to really go back over this, go back to your courses, start the hot mess handler. If you're a non-member or you're a gentleman listening, thinking, well, how can I do this? Literally go to any like search engine, type in LWDG hot mess handler, and you can access the course. The course is a standalone course, which means that you don't have to be a member to do the course. The support is within the membership, but the course and the training stands alone. It's there for you. If you are a member as well, and we've identified other sort of resources like other masterclasses, other checklists, etc., please talk to us if you don't know where to find them, and we'll tell you exactly where to go. Thank you very much for listening in. Thank you for joining us. We do hope you will join us next week for another episode, which I'm sure will be as incredibly fantastic. Our library of episodes now is mind-blowing. Thank you, Claire, for this. Claire, remind me, when are the holidays? When's the next holiday?
So the first training holiday weekend is in April. Let me just double check the date so I don't give it the wrong one. So the foundation is on the 27th and the 28th of April. And the advance, there are still a couple of spaces left on the advance in May. That's the 18th and 19th of May. But the novice one later in the year has sold out, but we are putting together a cancellation list for that.
Fabulous. And I think there are one or two, I'll check with Jem, I think there are one or two spaces on the Spaniel holiday as well left. They literally are low numbers. They are open to members only. If it's very close to the date, they're not filled, which is very rare. We will open them up to non-members. We may mention them on our business page or on our social media, but that is very, very a rare occurrence if there's other spaces left. So thank you everybody for listening. We hope you've had a fantastic week, and we hope you have another fantastic week ahead, and we shall see you all next week. That's it for today's episode. A massive thank you for tuning in. Don't forget to head over to the LWDG and sign up for our membership. Get access to expert-led training, a wonderfully supportive community, and the resources you need to become a confident and skilled gun dog trainer. Let's take this journey together, because no woman should have to train her gun dog alone. We'll see you all next week.